I've spent most of 2023 with the Samsung Galaxy S23 as my daily driver, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that the regular size flagship version of Samsung's phone this year just might be the most well-rounded phone from Samsung I've ever used. Why would I recommend the S23 over its pricier, beefier, well-spec'd siblings? Well, I'll let you know right now. In terms of physical design, I don't blame anybody for not being able to distinguish between a S21, an S22, and this year's S23 model. Aside from that previously segmented camera corner with that little hump, the basic S models have always retained essentially the same body for years now. It's looked almost exactly the same. That's not to say that's a negative thing, because I still think it looks gorgeous. It's still one of the nicer looking phones, and it's easy to hold in one hand. It's one of the best remaining one-handed mobile phones in my opinion. With a relatively smaller, by modern standards, 6.1-inch AMOLED display, the S23 is actually very comfortable to hold with that one hand. That 1080 by 2340p display has a 120Hz refresh rate and a 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio. Watching videos in both portrait and landscape mode is quite comfortable for long periods of time because of just how ergonomically friendly it is to grasp in just one hand or resting on two hands. Even though this isn't the sharpest Samsung panel put on a phone, the 425 ppi is actually still extremely satisfying to view. Darker colors are deep in contrast, and the vibrant nature of this AMOLED panel makes for a terrific companion for space wallpapers like the one I use from Wallpaper Engine. The S23 will continue to kind of wow you and honor the traditional quality viewing experiences that the company is known for. There's an under-display fingerprint scanner that recognizes my thumbs pretty much all of the time. It does pretty well. At this point, I do think this is the best the technology will get, so I can kind of live with what this fingerprint scanner gives me like 95% of the time. I've seen slower and far worse. The face scanner is also kind of reliable. It's a good screen unlock that I used to pair with the fingerprint scanner on this phone. As with what I said earlier about the display, while not the highest end specs on this phone offered by Samsung, the triple camera setup is still, I think, more than enough for most modern smartphone users. In fact, I've been actually immensely impressed with the results the shooter gave me while using it as my only camera on a trip to a scenic Florida during this early part of the summer. The 50 megapixel f1.8 wide sensor that you'll be using most often covers a terrific amount of ground without kind of warping the images. Actually, the 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide also does a terrific job of expanding the frame without making the image look abnormal. I avoid using ultra wide on some phones due to the fisheye barrel distortion, but the S23 has my confidence here. It does a good job. Samsung processes light fairly well in a variety of different situations. During sunsets, the S23 exposes the source light rather accurately and offers a solid contrast around the darker shades. In a brightly lit environment, it's actually very rare for the phone to overexpose in auto mode. The S23 doesn't wash out the background for shots under a scorching sun. Another feature I rarely use on smartphones is the telephoto zoom capabilities. I threw the 10 megapixel f2.4 telephoto lens to the test while on the safari at Animal Kingdom, and once again the results were surprisingly decent. Punching in 3 times the wide aperture didn't reduce the sharpness as much as I actually thought it would. I want to talk briefly about the low light capabilities of the S23 because I do think it's quite good as a nighttime snapper. In most scenarios, I would say the S23 will give you solid, usable photos to post basically onto your Instagram. If you look closer for detail, then you'll actually see that phone ups the exposure a little bit more to pick up details from further away than the main focal point of the source light is. I've seen much grainier in better lighting situations at this price point, so I do feel that Samsung does a pretty decent job here. I'm still on the fence, though, about whether I do prefer the Pixel 7 or an iPhone over the S23 for low-light photos, but at least they're all within the same ballpark of a conversation of each other. You can't really go wrong with any one of these phones right now in 2023 for low-light shooting. You expect these results from flagship phones when you pay so much money, and I'm actually satisfied with the quick nature in which I was able to just pull out this phone and snap a photo and then move on. This is what I do believe Samsung does really well, and it's a key to their success with this whole baseline S series of phones. While these phones don't give the highest specs or like photo results, they do really great on auto mode, and they're just great auto mode snappers that most people can just pull out and snap a great photo for their social media without needing to spend time with adjusting their frame to get a perfect shot. If you're that type of photo taker, then the S23 is extremely competitive, and it's a phone that you really should be looking at in this category. Keeping with this theme of the review, the 3900 mAh battery in the S23 isn't as big as the Ultra, obviously, but it's been a battery champion for me. I'm shocked at just how long this smartphone lasts with my daily usage. After a full workday, I get home around 8 p.m. with normally about like over 50% of the battery life left. Android 13 skinned with One UI 5.1, the S23 seems to run effectively with good background management for apps idling. This phone has really gained my confidence that it will last as long as I need on any given day. There's also wireless charging that just makes juicing up throughout the day even more convenient when I need to. Diverging from the lesser spec trend, the S23 shares the same flagship Qualcomm processor as its beefier siblings. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is the heart that makes this phone beat, and it has 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, no microSD expansion here. The phone is as snappy as any flagship I've used to date, and I've only come across a few times where the apps kind of lock up or force close, but most of these hiccups are few and far on the S23. The combination of the healthy battery longevity and the actual high-end chipset performance makes the S23 actually terrific for gaming, mobile gaming. I've been running Honkai Star Rail frequently since the launch date, and the results have been fantastic. It's a smooth runner. This is a game that actually requires long play sessions in which I did not once feel actually uncomfortable holding in my hands. The S23, for what it's worth in the gaming world, doesn't run too hot for long periods of gaming. So I have not seen throttling, it hasn't gotten hot, it actually has performed really well for these kind of RPG, gacha, long-term gameplays. Audio comes out of the bottom firing speaker as well as the earpiece for this kind of stereo mix that we've seen for a lot of phones now. It gets rather loud, but still kind of retains that decent quality without becoming distorted at higher levels of audio. The projection isn't as filling or whole sounding as I've kind of heard from some of the recent phones I've reviewed, but it does the job well enough where if you don't have a pair of Bluetooth headphones connected, it's still decent for a media enjoyment purpose. So at the end of the day, the S23 is actually very simple for me to review. Physically, it has the right build materials with its aluminium frame and its glass body to make this film like a premium purchase. It feels like an expensive phone. The flagship chipset also keeps it up there on par with the best of the best. And also the camera doesn't fall behind the industry leaders. What truly does set this phone apart is first the price tag, because it's around $700, and it's easier to hold in one hand than many of its flagship counterparts. I don't honestly see that drastic of a difference between this $700 phone and a $1,200 Ultra or Max titled smartphone, you know? There's tremendous overall value of the S23, this version of the S23, and I think it's a worthy consideration for just about any single type of smartphone buyer in the market hunting today. Once again, I'm Alex from the Sypnotix. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit that like button and the subscribe button. They help the channel a lot, and it'll keep you updated for new videos as they come. I'll see you guys in the next one.
So the other day, I was on a Zoom call at work, and I just dropped everything I was saying, and I told them, subscribe.